If this is your first time here, this is the Dreyer Drive podcast, a podcast all about siblings and the people, places, and pop culture that raised us. And this week, we are taking a lighter look at things, considering that last week's episode, we talked about murder. In this week's episode, we are taking a deep dive on The Simpsons, everybody's favorite animated family. We'll be looking a little bit at the psychology of Simpsons sibling dynamics, and it will trigger a hilarious memory of a fight that Jacqueline and I had as kids. As always, we'll start off with a question. This week's question, heads up, there will be a story about vomit. So if you do not like that type of content, I encourage you to skip today's question and answer at the beginning of the podcast. And as always, at the end of this episode, you will get an unhinged text message from a family member. And this week's, I say this all the time, this week's is truly unhinged. It didn't come from a family member. It was reported somewhere else, but then it was transmitted via text to our sibling thread on Messenger. Let's get into this.
I saw something that like you should, every time you need to like pick up again, you should clap because it creates a spike in the sound, so you can scroll through when you're editing and go straight to the clap and realize that was where you needed to do a pickup.
We can do that.
Scream into the microphone. Keep that in.
That's the intro to this podcast. Welcome to
This has been Editing Podcast with
Oh man, and this is what everyone's getting today. This is what everybody's getting from us.
Sorry. I feel like the Menendez brothers broke us. When I was planning today, I was like, I can only have good vibes about this topic because I'm like, I just can't go back to that place. I can't watch documentaries about murderers anymore. So
today we will be taking a deep dive on the two brothers who invented the adult diaper.
I have an adult diaper story, sadly enough.
What? What?
One time, we live 6 hours away from Vegas. So one year, Justin's work for our Christmas party, we did a weekend in Vegas. And so we all went down to Vegas together and we did shows or whatever. But one of his employees, Justin's known him since he was little. He's one of our neighbors. He's known him since he was 12 years old. He hired him when he was like 18 and now he's 30 and he's worked for us this entire time. But he was probably like 23, 24 when this happened. And everybody got to bring a +1 and he didn't have a girlfriend at the time. So he brought his 15-year-old brother with him.
To Vegas.
To Vegas. And then because I felt like I was like responsible for them the entire time, I was just like covering up their eyes. We went to a show, there was pole dancing in it. I was like, look away. And so after being on the strip for a couple of hours, I was like, this is not a safe place for you to be with your 15-year-old brother. So we decided to go down to Fremont Street, have you ever been to Vegas?
I know. Yeah.
So we decided to go down to Fremont Street because I was like, maybe that'll be like less intense. I was like, no, okay, that'll be calmer down at Fremont Street. We won't have to worry about like the showgirls and everything. We get out of the car onto Fremont Street, and the first thing that we see is a giant man dressed as a baby in a diaper, and he's like blowing kisses at me. And I was like, we're back in the car! Everybody back in the car! We're not doing this. And that's my adult diaper story. Definitely go to Vegas. What an experience. Just
bring your 15-year-olds.
What happens in Vegas scars you for life.
Well, I think now would be a good time to introduce the sponsor for today's episode, which is the Las Vegas Tourism Board. I don't know. I liked Vegas. I'm
not a Vegas person. It's very stressful for me because I feel like everybody wants me to do something that I'm not doing. Like, take a picture, look over here. Like, I feel very uncomfortable there.
Sorry, are those the two things that you don't want to take a picture, nor do you want to look over there? I draw the line there. All right? I am not looking.
How dare you, sir? I am not a puppet.
Vegas, I hate you. Pictures and looking, that's literally every vacation. Every vacation is taking pictures and looking at things that you haven't seen before. No. What?
No, thank you, sir. Not for me. I like to keep my eyes closed and remember it in my mind.
So once again, thank you, Las Vegas.
And adult diapers.
Well, this is the Dreyer Drive podcast. If you don't know about it, if you haven't read about this in all the news media outlets recently, this is a podcast where we talk about siblings and the people, places, and pop culture that raised us. And today's episode is already so far off the rails. We've been recording for 10 minutes.
Where's it going?
And
Nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody knows. All I know is there are no photos and we will be doing no looking.
And I'm not looking over there. If that's what you're asking, it's going to be a hard no for me. Before we answer the question that I will make up in my head right now, so I'm stopping.
We'll buy some time.
No, I was just talking to Jonathan, and he had an answer for the question that we did during the Conan episode, because that's the one he listened to last. And the question was like, which games would you like to bring back?
Yes,
for family night.
You said marching around the living room singing religious songs with the blinds closed.
Normal things.
And I said Booga Wooga, which is the scavenger hunt game.
Jonathan was like, my input would be the game Whoa. I had the exact same reaction. I was like, I forgot Whoa. Now, Whoa is a game that we made up. We lived, how far from Annie Gill's house? Like 2
Distance-wise or
kilometers?
time-wise? Yeah, it was an extremely walkable distance. It was probably a 3-minute car ride, and that's going through the subdivision. Do you remember there were two routes?
Subdivision.
One was through the subdivision, and one was, I guess, just the regular way down Harwood. But yeah, the subdivision. No, Dad, drive down the subdivision so we can play Whoa.
We wanted to play Whoa, so we would beg Dad to take us to the subdivision. And the way you played Whoa, we could only play it between our house and Annie Gale's house, which we spent a lot of time. So, you know, we're talking like 3 or 4 times a week we'd be able to play Whoa. And it's when we knelt in the back seat of the car facing the rearview window, no seatbelts, because it was the 90s, and Dad would drive really crazy, and because when we went from side to side, we'd say, whoa, whoa. That's why it was called Whoa.
I love that, like, the games that were invented.
What a cerebral family where we're like, what should we call this game that we play where we say whoa? Like,
Booga Wooga, it's taken. Whoa.
Guys, whoa. And we're like, nice. It's one of those games that you have as kids where it never really, like, there were no rules set. We just started doing it one day. And then, like, the next day was like, Dad, can we play Whoa? Like, that's not a real game.
But it continued for a very long time because there was 5 of us, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it started maybe with the older ones and then just kept going. So there was a good decade of Whoa in the house. And
it's funny because
in the house, no, in the car.
And Dad's not like a wild and crazy guy. It's not like, I mean, I don't think it was like within his personality to be like, hey kids, let's play a game together. But because he loves to drive, he would let us play Whoa every single time through the subdivision, of course, because it had more corners.
He also definitely didn't name that game.
The best was when you would be like an older teenager and the little kids, the little boys would be like, let's play Whoa. And you'd be like, no, I'm too old for that. But then Dad would just start doing it and you'd be like, this is kind of fun.
Whoa, and you're right back in.
So that was Jonathan's. So that was.
Is there a mosquito in your office right now?
That was me. That's me trying to help you edit. I'm doing my part. That was Jonathan's submission. I was like, Jonathan, be honest, do you actually want to be in the podcast? He's like, absolutely not. But he does want to like have his say.
We said in episode number 1, the purpose of this podcast is to create content in a way so that, so we create conflict with our family, but no, so we can create some content that maybe allows us to avoid speaking to others. But what's happened is that it actually creates more conversation because now everybody thinks they're a podcaster like the 2 of us.
And it's like, it's not as easy as you think, bud.
I want 2 other siblings to start their own podcast.
Okay, so my question for this week then: if you were going to sell if you were going to sell a candle that was labeled Dreyer Drive, what would it smell like? And it can't be cat pee. It has to be a nice smelling. It has to be a nice smelling candle in the best way possible.
Oh, it has to be a good way?
No, it could be traumatic.
So I remember a time where we had a blue Chrysler minivan, and we referred to it very endearingly as Le Flamme Bleu. And for those who don't speak French, that translates to the blue flame. And we call it the blue flame. It was, well, 1, because it was blue, and 2, because when you stopped the car or went any slower than maybe 2 kilometers per hour, it would spew blue smoke from the muffler to the point where, like, if we were stuck in traffic, Dad would have to turn the van off instead of stopping the van because people wouldn't be able to see. It was an actual hazard. You know, in the movies when people are like, oh, smoke screen, and they blow some smoke and people get lost and the bandits get away? That's literally what it was like. And I remember one time driving in La Flamme Bleue with one of Dan's friends, Daryl. We'll leave it at that, but Daryl. Yeah, I'm fairly certain it was Daryl. In my memory, it's Daryl. I can't remember where we had been, but wherever we were, there was an extreme amount of Orange Crush soda consumed. And driving home, I don't know if we were in traffic or if it was the fumes from La Flamme Bleue, but Daryl puked Orange Crush soda all over. Like, he was in the back row. I was in the middle row, and he puked all over the middle row, and we were all bracing like it was an aircraft crashing. It's like the alarm went, brace, 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 brace. We are all like heads between our legs, hands over our heads, and this guy's just spray puking Orange Crush soda puke all over La Flamme Bleue. And so first of all, just a horrible experience. And no matter what we did to clean out that van, anytime the temperature rose warmer or got warmer than like 20 degrees Celsius, it just started creeping out of the crevices of that van. And it didn't smell like puke. It just smelled like orange soda forever, for time and all eternity. It's still in a junkyard somewhere, is just slowly releasing fumes of Orange Crush soda.
The smell of Orange Crush was there forever.
Yeah, it's like that annoying cousin that comes and stays with your family every summer, except ours never left a van and smelled like Orange Crush soda.
So my answer was also orange in color, which is interesting, but the smell is peach gum. Do you remember why?
Yes, fully. I will let you tell the story, but this is a story that many of my friends have heard and love.
I'm sure they benefited from the peach gum, but Dad went to the dump one day
with
Daniel, and to get rid of whatever. We generated a lot of garbage, and
that required regular trips to a dump.
Yeah.
Like, what do we do? Just bring it to the landfill.
And while they were there, they found an entire, what would you say, like a crate?
Yeah, I think a crate is a very good word choice for this.
An entire crate of Trident peach flavored gum. And they were like, this gum that's in the garbage, it's coming home with us. We own it now. And
there's no other option.
They brought it home. So proud. Like, what a treasure, what a find. And guess what? Everybody ate it. Everybody in the family ate that peach gum, and like we gave it out to friends. Like, people would come over. It's like, you want a package of peach gum? We have 1,000 packages in it.
Even that's not a good exaggerated number, because I think it was more than 1,000. That's how many packs of gum were in that landfill, and then in our house, and then in our mouths.
And the smell was like the pungent smell. Like, it makes you know when your throat gets like sweaty right before you're gonna barf, Orange Crush? That's anytime I think of that peach gum, because we not only did we eat it, but we ate it for months. Like, for months, Mom and Dad wouldn't buy gum because they'd be like, we have gum at home. And please, no. And they kept it like in their bedroom, just this giant crate. And one of the things, because our dad worked night shift, he slept during the day, constantly, like, one of my most enduring childhood memories is going into his room when it was pitch black and be like, Dad, can I have some money for pizza, for Little Caesars? And he'd wave you away, and then you'd go through his pockets, grab a couple toonies out of his jeans on the floor, grab a couple packs of peach gum, and you were on your way.
Head right down to Little Caesars for a pack of Crazy Bread. Extra Parmesan.
Which took over, sadly, the Chippy. Was it the Chippy, right?
No, the Chippy was around the corner. Oh. The Chippy was around the corner because they used to have that little alley. The Chippy was at the end there. And I remember I would probably be pretty embarrassed, appalled, if I found out that my children were doing this. But the area that we grew up in, I think that it was a very working class area. Blue
collar for sure.
Yeah, I would say blue collar. People worked at GM, they worked at the DuPont factory, they worked at Lear, the seat factory. So I think a lot of my friends' parents growing up, like, they worked in factories or manufacturing or some kind of plant or other, manufacturing place. I don't know why. I just found 9 words to describe manufacturing.
Making things.
Making things in a line with other people. And I remember one time hanging out with a bunch of kids, and they're like, hey, have you ever gone to the Chippy and asked for Crispies? And I'm like, What's a crispy? They're like, so the Chippy was a fish and chips place run by a family from Scotland, maybe?
I believe I was going to say Ireland, but I think we're in the same geographic area.
Yeah, give or take a few countries, east or west, north to south, like that area of the world. And it was fish and chips. So they've got those deep fry baskets and just a giant tub of oil where they deep fry every menu item and then they hand it out in
and then
wrapped
you
up
douse
newspaper.
it in vinegar and then you're on your way.
But you could go in there and ask for Crispies, and they would take one of the empty baskets and pull it out of the deep fryer, and it would just have all the extra bits of batter that like rolled off of the fish, like the real fish, and they would just put that into a bag for us to eat, and we'd be like, and it'd be free. We'd be like, hey, can we get some Crispies? We'd be like, yeah. We're scamming the system. We're like, I can't believe that they're just giving this away. Like, the Crispies is a magic word. They're literally giving us garbage.
They're literally just cleaning out their deep fryers and feeding it to you. And you're like, woo!
And we're eating, and we're like, beat the system. We are eating garbage. We are clogging our arteries. We are doing irreversible damage to our hearts. And we are cheering like we found this glitch in the Matrix.
We spent so much time at the Chippy because it was close to our school. So often, like, if you wanted to like leave for lunch, you'd run down to the Chippy and get a fry. But the woman who worked there owned it. I don't know. The main Chippy lady, she had these like, I don't know how to explain them other than corns on her elbows. And I would sit there and watch her dish up our Chippies for like our long line of friends that all just like came in at the exact same time. And I couldn't take my eyes off of her elbows. Those were the Crispies. You know that,
right? Orange soda everywhere.
Orange soda. Peach gum.
And that's a little tale on how the Porters did and still do eat garbage.
I love to eat garbage to this day.
Gum from a landfill and bottom of the nets of a deep fryer. And that's how we got to where we are now.
What's crazy is how did we make it out alive? Like, kids today, I'm like, is that applesauce pouch organic? It's not going into my child. Well, we were literally eating garbage out of a dumpster.
And the thing I find so funny about it is that mom and dad, like they kept it off in like a separate part of the house. Like, we couldn't have access to the garbage gum.
Yeah,
like that's where.
Yeah, you had to ask for it. You couldn't just like go in willy nilly. Like, Mom, I've got some friends over. I really want to impress them with my access to peach gum. Can we have 10 packages? Okay, that was my question.
Quick little jog down memory lane filled with orange puke soda, peach flavored garbage gum, and like, Crispies.
Like, I want my kids to be like, I remember our house. It always smelled like cinnamon. And I'm like, barf. And also that we're looking upon it fondly too. We weren't like, that's gross. We're like, oh, what I wouldn't give for a candle.
If I could just turn back the hands of time.
Orange barf. I would light that in my house right now.
Well, Seiko, I've mentioned this before, Seiko makes candles.
Seiko could do it. She could make a porter line of candles. When this podcast really takes off, that's our merch. That's our merch. It's going to smell like old French
soda. Old French fries and garbage gum. Straight to the top. There's no stopping us.
How have we not become famous earlier is what I want to know. We're full of
by the time this one comes out, we might be famous.
No, that's true. That's true.
We've got a 6-episode buffer here. This might be our last time talking to each other with this type of humility.
And also, like, not on tour.
Also, yeah, not doing live stadiums. What I was going to say was Seiko makes candles, and she has a little candle room in our house, and it smells delightful in our house all the time, to the point where, like, Noah even walks with... smells so good in here. So I'm happy to know that if those memories stick, Noah will have a podcast in 35 years where she goes, I remember my house smelling like sea breeze and chestnuts.
Seiko made me a candle once, and it was probably the best thing I've ever smelled, and I haven't had one since. Thanks a lot. And that's all I pray for at Christmas. Just like, please, I don't know what it smelled like. I don't know what she made it out of, but I just know that it smelled so good. Spoiler alert, everybody will be getting candles for Christmas this year. And I'd like to take this time to thank our second sponsor of this episode, which is Gona Candles. Okay, well, are we ready to get into our very fun topic today? Because we're just bringing the energy back up after last week. Okay, I have a clue for you today. I don't know why I keep making you guess, because like If the roles were reversed and you were making me guess every week, I would be furious because I don't.
I would be storm quitting this podcast.
I'd be like,
I mean,
I'm
rage
not doing
quitting.
this. Yeah, I would be like
Storm quitting?
Storm quitting. It's like when you quit in the storm. Like, not today, Thunder.
Like I said, very little sleep, folks. Very little sleep.
Okay, I want to see. Hopefully this works. Just listen.
Oh, it's an audio clue?
It's an audio clue. Shh. Did it sound familiar to you?
So familiar that I'm actually going and saying that tone is in my brain, but it's not attached to anything.
So it was
like, how did you not? Is it not a screen with the backs of people's heads?
Yep.
In like a movie theater?
Yep.
But what the heck is it? Is it the ending credits for something?
It is.
You got to give it to me. There's no way. I remember those things about it, but I cannot attach it to words.
It is the ending credits for The Simpsons. After The Simpsons credits rolled, that would come on. It's The Simpsons. Because it's for Gracie Films, which is the people who produced The Simpsons.
So we would sit around and watch all of the credits roll to the point where that insane. First off, hats off to the Simpsons writers for keeping us on the edges of our seats until the very end of the credits. That's something that's ingrained in my brain. But for some reason, I couldn't connect it to the Simpsons.
To be fair, for me, I was, again, watching a documentary because that's all I do with my time is watch documentaries about brothers and sisters at this point. And they were talking about Gracie Films, and I was like, Gracie Films, why do I know Gracie Films? And then I realized I connected it with that, and I was like, oh, that sound is extremely familiar to me, like it is the sound of my childhood for a good 10 years. So that's what I want to talk about today. The Simpsons. It's fun. Only good feelings about The Simpsons around these parts, other than our mom, who we were not actually allowed to watch The Simpsons. She would be very upset about this episode to this day. I was talking to Jonathan today about it. Jonathan, also a huge Simpsons fan when we were kids. Remember he had that big poster in his room that had every Simpsons character? And he was like, it was such a dumb and arbitrary rule because we weren't allowed to watch it, but also we didn't get in trouble for watching it. Mom would just be kind of like, make her like disappointed noise, which is just this.
She just kisses her teeth.
Kisses her teeth when we watch The Simpsons. We knew we weren't supposed to watch The Simpsons, and we might change it when she came in the room, but we very much were Simpsons viewers for a long time. Let me give you a quick rundown, and then I was like, let's talk about like sibling episodes of The Simpsons. But when I started getting into the actual history of The Simpsons, of course, that started to be way more interesting to me, and we'll just go through it. So The Simpsons was created by Matt Groening. It was begun as a 1-minute short that they would put in the Tracy Ullman Show, which we did not watch the Tracy Ullman Show. It probably would have been a bit before our time. It was around, I think, 1987 that they first started doing these 1-minute shorts about this family. How they even got to The Simpsons is just like a crazy story. Matt Groening was just like grew up in Portland, I believe, but he has sisters that are named, you guessed it, Maggie and Lisa. His dad's name is Homer.
No.
His mom's name is Marge.
No.
He has a sister named Patty as well. He obviously pulled from his family relationships. His dad was actually Canadian, which I thought was really interesting, thinking about how often The Simpsons does have like Canadian themes, or they go to Canada or that kind of stuff. And they use a lot of Canadian stereotypes. If you remember the episode where they go to Canada, they see a taping of Canadian graffiti, which is just people spraying "Obey the Rules" on the wall. So it's like, oh, I get it now. I get why he felt like he could make fun of Canadians so often, because his dad, Homer, actually grew up in Saskatchewan. So he grows up with his family, which I feel like tells you everything you need to know about a person. He was really popular when he was a kid. He was he was class president, so we would know a little something about that. And
Birds of a feather.
Yeah, same, Matt. He goes to college and becomes the editor of the school paper and starts making up little comics to put in the school paper. In 1977, he creates an actual comic, and it's called Life in Hell. And Life in Hell is like a depiction of like his life. I think he moved out to LA and was just kind of trying to make it out there, and so he started drawing this comic, and it's centered around a bunny, which looked very much like a Simpsons bunny, and just going through all these motions. And he wanted to sell it. He was like stapling it together and distributing it by hand, basically, because he really wanted to get it out there. He gets a job at a magazine, and the comic gets in a paper by 1980. But by 1986, he gets fired. From what I was reading about him, he was supposed to like review bands, but he didn't want to, so he'd make up bands and review them.
He would review the made-up bands with nothing to review.
Yeah,
I love that.
They'd be like, Matt, you need to go away for the weekend and review a band. And he'd come back and it was like, it was amazing. And it wasn't, the band didn't exist. He just went away for the weekend. So he's in the process of getting fired, trying to figure out his next move. At the same time, on TV, there's the three big networks, which are NBC, ABC, CBS. And do you know what made them the big three besides like programming?
Letters? I'm guessing letters. They had to have.
They had the strongest signal because they were lower numbers on the dial. That's a stronger signal. So nobody else can get in because they don't get the better signal. That's why Fox and MTV, Much Music for my Canadian listeners, they were higher numbers on the dial. So that's how old we are right now. The TVs have dials. So ABC, CBS is out there. They're putting out very family-friendly programming. And one of the executives, I believe from ABC, starts a new network, and his network is Fox. Fox, I believe, starts out on like 31 or 29 on the dial. So they already know they're like fighting a losing battle, but they really want to compete with these big three. And the way they want to compete with them is they decide that they're just like, where they're zigging, they're going to zag. So they decide they're going to put more edgy stuff on their network. And one of the first things they put on is actually Married with Children, another show we were absolutely not allowed
That
to
was
watch.
a hard line.
They're actively looking for programming that will compete against what ABC and CBS and NBC is putting out. They've heard about Matt Groening and they've seen his Life in Hell comic and they're like, hey, would you be interested in animating Life in Hell for Fox? And Matt is like, absolutely not, because he didn't want to lose the merchandising. He thought Life in Hell was going to be huge and he didn't want to lose the merchandising rights for it. So he was like, I can't give you Life in Hell, but I have something else in the works. Spoiler alert, he didn't have anything else in the works. And one of the things that I read said he literally came up with The Simpsons, like scribbling on a paper while he was waiting to go into his meeting. Like he had nothing to give them.
Wow.
So he came up with this family-based comic, and he used obviously his family as the inspiration for it, all the same names and everything, and he brings it to them and they're like, we like it, it's not good enough to have its own show, but we'll put it on this other show, the Tracy Ullman Show. And Tracy Ullman Show was kind of like I would say it was like a Monty Python, like where they would do funny little skits. It was kind of weird, and then they would do these 1-minute Simpsons cartoons in the
Shorts?
Shorts. Yeah, that's what they would call them, the Simpsons shorts. I watch them. They're wild to see because first of all, they're really slow and they're so like tender and naive compared to what the Simpsons ended up being. And people were like, this is crazy. We've never seen a family like this. And I'm like, okay. So they start putting these on and they start to become so popular that people are phoning the network to ask what time within the Tracy Ullman Show the Simpsons are going to be shown, because they don't want to watch Tracy Ullman. They only want to
They
watch
just want to tune in for The Simpsons. Yeah. That's wild.
So they're getting calls at the network and they're like, what time? So we can plan accordingly. That's when they decide that they're going to test run The Simpsons as specials, still not its own cartoon. And they start with a Christmas special and it does really well. And then they're like, originally they thought we're just going to do specials, but they were like, you know what? Let's try our hand at like a half an hour comedy and see what happens. And so that's what they do. They put it on in 1989 is the start of the Christmas special, and then they start doing regular 30-minute episodes in January of 1990. So
I remember talking about this in episode 2 when we looked at the Ninja Turtles, because in my brain, I'm older watching these things. You know what I mean? Like I'm not like a child, but like the Ninja Turtles were early 80s, right? And so was The Simpsons. It's wild to me to think that they were starting that early. It's also crazy to think that obviously now, knowing what television has on and all the streaming services and whatever, it's wild to think that that was edgy at the time. It's wild to think that Don't Have a Cow, man, was considered wash your mouth out with soap material in our household growing up.
Aaron, my 8-year-old, asked me what Eat My Shorts meant because he had heard it. And then like me trying to explain, I'm like, honestly, I don't really even know what Eat My Shorts meant. It was just like a Simpsonism that Bart came up with. And I'm like, I don't even know where he would have heard it. Simpsons now to me is like a show that like my whole family can enjoy. Like
gather around, the Simpsons are.
I'm like, okay, like we can all watch this, because I do feel like they structure the jokes in a way that that if you're gonna get them, you get them, but a kid under the age of 12 has no idea what's going on. They just think like Bart says funny things and Homer's clumsy, so they're picking up on that. And I think that's why parents hated it so much, was that they were picking up on jokes that we would never have even caught. In 1990, Barbara Bush and George H.W. Bush come out publicly against The Simpsons. They say that they are not in line with family values. They actively campaign against it, saying like, we want America to be like the Waltons, not the Simpsons. And it's like, okay. The Simpsons writers responded by putting them in an episode. They were like, the neighbors that moved across the street. So that's what was the catalyst for that, was that they were actively coming out against The Simpsons. Which
for the politicians listening to this to gain policy insights and platform strategy, it's never a good strategy to come out and publicly go against some piece of kind of mainstream media or personality. It will only create more attention and support for that thing.
Well, especially because when Fox developed this, they specifically were like, we want it to be like mean. We want it to be kind of annoying. Like we want it to be aggravating. And obviously they were all comedians writing the show. So it's like, also don't come out against people who are mean, aggravating comedians. Like, I just feel like those are the people that you don't want to upset.
And the way that they wrapped everything up in like a quote unquote, it's just literally the same word twice. And I somehow managed to butcher it the second time, just throw an R in there. I want to differentiate the two. It's like twins. I give one a different haircut. So quote unquote. So quote unquote, like your typical family, right? You've got a mom, a dad, and a few kids. So it looks on the surface like, hey, this is going to be a great little episode or a little show about a normal family. And then they're throwing out these absolutely lewd and vulgar phrases like eat my shorts and don't have a cow.
And I guess it too was the first time animation had been used not specifically just for children, right? Like there weren't a lot of... So that was also, I feel like a lot of parents also felt they were being like, their children were being fooled into thinking it was a kid's show. To be like, I think our mom was definitely like, this is not a kid's show. This is not a kid's show for kids, and was like worried that we were going to be like taken in by it and like start talking like Bart. Bart, who is actually modeled after Matt himself. And you know, at the beginning when he's writing out on the blackboard, that's came from Matt Groening's own life. He had to write like, I will be quiet on a chalkboard 500 times when he was in school. Just took that all through.
And what a cool little, like, again, another hat tip to the writers, that little kind of Easter egg, like those little things that people would look for, right? Like, I don't know if it was set out or engineered that way where they decided that every episode is going to have something different being written on the chalkboard. And you think about that time frame, it wasn't the world where you're quickly able to like edit, get episodes out kind of on the fly. These are things that had to be planned out in advance so that those pieces were a part of like the Simpsons DNA, those little Easter eggs, the little hidden things that people would want to look for and would tune in to watch. That's the opening credits. Like, name another series where you really wanted to watch the opening credits to see what would be written or what would be done.
That, yeah, it was like, it was exciting to watch the opening, but why they did that, because for the show of its time, it had a really long opening credit scene, you know, when they would do the car and the sitting on the couch and Bart writing on the thing. And they did that because it cut down on the animation time for the actual episode. And so it was like, instead of having to plan 27 minutes of animation, they were able to cut it down to 25. And so they would just reanimate the scenes from the original cells, and it would save their team a lot of time. The team that they got to actually do the animation was kind of a fly-by-night small team, and they were just looking for ways to cut down and be more efficient, and that's what they came up with, and that's what Simpsons is known for, which is so wild. Just
another one that you touched on there, the sofa. Like, you wanted to see what crazy thing was going to happen when the whole family gathered on the sofa or in the room around the sofa, depending on the opening. But genius. It's so good.
So as it progresses on through the 90s, so we would have been watching it from basically 1990 to probably when we moved out. I would say for 10 years, we were probably watching it pretty solidly. And I think one of the things that I liked about it a lot, which obviously didn't realize until I was older, but I liked that in a way Simpsons gave permission for a family to be a little bit messy. And so if you were from a messy family who didn't see yourself represented in, say, the Cosbys or whatever, the Cosby was their main competitor at the time between the Simpsons. They had the same time slot and they were actively head to head every time. And so to see, you know, these families that were really shiny and perfect and they always got along and they always learned a lesson at the end. And to see The Simpsons and be like, oh, like sometimes they're mean to each other and sometimes the parents lose their tempers and sometimes their house is a mess and sometimes their pets are disgusting, and like that, like to see a family that looked like our family a little bit, where it was just messy and loud and chaotic, like I loved that. It was part of watching it for me.
It's just how maybe normal they actually seemed. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so funny and maybe even ironic. I don't know if I'm using that word appropriately, but it's almost ironic that mom was like, please do not watch the show that perfectly resembles our family, right? Like messy animals, and we look over and our dog has a tumor hanging out of its butthole, puking up a chocolate cake that it just ate. Do you know what I mean? Like Dan being brought home by the police at age 10, dad running inside pretending he's not the father of the kid who's being brought home by the police. Like those kinds of things. And mom is like, no, we are not watching this show that normalizes this family.
Like, it is too fresh. It is too close to home. I don't want that. Oh, I watched this documentary. It was by Icons on Earth on, I can't remember what the channel was. Icons on Earth, I think it was Amazon Prime. But one of the creators said, you know, he'd worked on sitcoms before, and the whole point of the sitcom was that it felt like a surrogate family. So when you watch the Cosbys, you should feel like you're part of the family. If you watch Cheers, you're part of the Barr family, like all of these. And so he wanted to create a surrogate family that looked most like his own family, a regular family. And I'm like, that's exactly why I think we loved it so much.
And likely why every other family also loved it. It gave everybody just like a breath of relief that like, okay, we don't have to be like the Winslows. We don't have to be like the Cosbys. We don't have to be like the Waltons. We don't have to be like these perfect families that exist on television. You know, we're okay with being the Simpsons.
Do you remember the Torkelsons? There was like 2 years that we watched the Torkelsons.
Yeah, the Torkelsons. Didn't one of the kids have like the box haircut and the big glasses, I think?
He's like the ugliest kid. Yeah, definitely.
Whoa, shots fired.
Sorry if you're listening, ugly kid from the Torkelsons. I'm sure you're very good looking now.
Or not.
As an aside, Matt has 2 kids. Matt Groening has 2 kids, and what does he name them? Homer and Abe.
No.
Like, strong. And his son, who's named Homer, doesn't go by Homer. Shockingly, he just goes by his middle name. But I just love that he named his kid Homer. And also, so 1990 is also when Bart, what they call Bart Mania, kicks off, when everybody became extremely obsessed with Bart Simpson and everything he said. And we all had the shirts and we all had the lunch boxes. And they made an album and it sold 3 million copies, which what are people actually doing with their money in 1990? Good grief.
I'm sure that I could remember lyrics of the Bart Simpson rap song.
Do the Bartman?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna look up the lyrics while you're talking.
Okay, so Bartmania.
So I'm pretty sure there's a scene there goes, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Like there's that part, and I remember thinking just how rap of you.
Like
just
how
throw in those
subversive.
dirty words.
Bart, I could never.
Deep trouble. That's it. You're in deep trouble.
Oh my gosh.
We need to put this in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put out the show notes.
Yeah, continue.
Okay, so by 91, Matt Groening and one of the other creators has kind of a falling out, and they kind of restructure and new writers take over. So from 93 on, it's actually written by other people, but still created by Groening. He still gets the creative credits for it, and he still...
And the money. Let's just call it spade a spade. He gets all the money.
He makes bank. Turnout Life in Hell was not like quite the windfall he thought it was going to be, and he makes all of his money off The Simpsons. So I was thinking about specifically episodes that tackle sibling dynamics that I really liked, and 2 that I remembered off the top of my head that they're not my favorite episodes. My number 1 favorite episode is when the dolphins take over Springfield. It's one of the Treehouse of Horror ones. That's my all-time favorite episode. But if you remember, there was one where Bart goes into a casino and has a vision where he sees the future, and Lisa's the president. Do you remember this? Lisa's the president of the United States, and Bart's like this kind of like slacker brother, but she lets him move into the White House with her, and
I do remember this.
He uses it to like publicize his music career, and she's like, super embarrassed. And at the end, he comes out of this vision and he tells her like, I had this really crazy dream about us when we were grown-ups, and she's like, what did I do? And he was like, I don't know, you had some like boring government job. And I was like, that's such a brother thing to do, like not tell her any of it and then downplay what she actually did. And then the second one that I thought of was Homer when he finds out he has a brother, Herb, who is actually played by Danny DeVito. And Herb is a car manufacturer from Detroit and lets Homer design his dream car, which plays the cucaracha from the horn.
And it has every accessory and add-on and bolt-on, and they think they're being like counterculture by accepting Homer's suggestions for this car for like the everyday man, I think was the whole like concept behind the car, and letting Homer make
it has like
the
a bubble where like you can't hear the kids in the back, and so it's just like this car with 2 giant bubbles on it singing like cucaracha. Anyway, his brother goes bankrupt at the end of it, but they're like, we're still brothers through it all, which also I love.
Yeah, that's the one I would have said for like sibling dynamics, not with the 2 kids, but with Homer and his brother, because that's one of my favorite episodes actually. And I still reference it at least once a year in a meeting at work. I'm like, we want to make sure that we are not letting this project become the Homermobile here.
Yep. I use that all the time. Or like when the Cybertruck came out, I was like, I'm sorry, did Homer Simpson himself design this?
Which, by the way, is maybe an interesting point to mention this. I'm sure everybody's aware of this, but The Simpsons has been well known to predict wild world events in their shows, to the point where like it's a full-blown conspiracy theory that The Simpsons has some inside track on what's happening in like world politics or entertainment. And I actually found an article that goes through some of the things that they predicted, some of the wild things that they predicted. I want to mention just a few, and then obviously we'll continue with the notes that I'm sure you have prepared. One, they predicted that Donald Trump would be the president. They predicted that in season 11, episode 17, called Bart to the Future.
Thanks a lot. Bart to the Future is the one where Lisa becomes the president. They say in the show that he was the previous president.
So there you go. They predicted that Trump would be the president. They predicted Super Bowls. They predicted Lady Gaga's halftime show at the Super Bowl. They predicted autocorrect, the feature on a phone, autocorrect.
Like how? Does it say?
This is one of the few cases when The Simpsons not only made a prediction, but actively contributed to events. A quick gag has Bully Dolph writing the memo, beat up Martin on his Apple Newton. The text then translates to eat up Martha, a clear crack at the PDA's poor handwriting recognition. And sources allege that years later, when Apple was working on the iPhone keyboard, employees knew that this was the part they had to nail. They would even quote, eat up Martha to each other to signal the feature's importance.
Wow.
Wild, right?
It's pretty impressive.
And this will be the last one I leave, but there are dozens of these. So if you're interested, go, and there are blogs written about these. There's the list.
Look up Simpsons future predictions.
So the last one I have is the Siegfried and Roy tiger attack was predicted in season 5, episode 10.
I remember that episode that Siegfried and Roy is in it.
It's the one where Mr. Burns wants to build a casino in Springfield. And so there's a bunch of the Vegas references, right? And one of them would be Siegfried and Roy being attacked by a tiger.
Wow. Did you know, well, we talked about Conan, and Conan also wrote 3 of the most beloved Simpsons episode, one of which is the monorail one.
Hands down, which is one of top 3. Monorail, hands down, one of my favorite episodes.
He also wrote the one where Homer goes to college and has the nerdy roommates and they steal a pig. And then he also wrote the one where Bart gets a crush on his babysitter and she's dating his bully. So I read this article. It was in Parade magazine, and it was actually done in partnership with Psychology magazine as well. And it was specifically about what Simpsons can teach us specifically about sibling dynamics. And a lot of it was kind of just, I don't know, quacky, I guess. They were like, Lisa wishes that she was more important in her family's eyes, and that's why she acts out. And I'm like, okay, I feel like that's going a little too deep. But one thing that it did say was that sibling dynamics are what teach kids about dealing with the opposite gender. And you learn how to deal with your opposite gender based on your brothers and sisters. So you learn how to deal with girls because you had a sister, and that I learned how to deal with boys. And then I would go forward through my life and treat every male in my life the same way I treat you 4, and vice versa. And I was like, I've never thought of that before, and I would like to know your take on it.
I am counting down the minutes to my friends messaging me after hearing this episode. My friend, singular, my friend is listening to this episode and sending me a message because I have a friend who told me that his favorite memory of 26 Dreyer was the time that me and you got into a fight. I pushed you to the ground and put a piece of plywood on top of you and started jumping on the piece of plywood. It's his favorite memory of Dreyer Drive is me just being an absolute monster of an older brother, trapping you under a piece of construction grade plywood and jumping up and down on it.
Okay,
and so I imagine him, hold on, I imagine him hearing this comment about you saying, and it says that the relationship with your sibling predicts your way of dealing with the opposite gender throughout your life. And now he's picturing me with a piece of plywood on top of my wife, just 2 foot stomping.
And 2 daughters. all the girls get it. All the girls get the same treatment.
But the fact that that's his favorite memory. Like, come on, not the dog with the tumor hanging out of its butt. That couldn't be it. It's me.
Classic.
Yes.
The worst part is I know exactly which friend it is, first of all, because he's talked to me about it and been like, I remember. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a painful.
Do you guys still do that crazy thing where your brother puts you on a piece of wood?
Thank you for bringing up my trauma. I've been working really hard to forget it.
Let me revisit that on Monday in my session with my therapist.
There was also a time, speaking in the way you guys treated me, one year I was 5 years old. It was Halloween. Mom made me a costume. It was homemade. I was a space girl, and it was like silver, and it had like silver armbands and like a really big collar, silver collar, and Mom put little electrical lights through it. And it had a battery pack so I could light it up. And
it sounds so nerdy as you explain it like that. Little electrical lights with a battery pack.
I was the
homemade
coolest 5-year-old in town. And Mom and Dad made you and Daniel take me trick-or-treating, and as soon as we got out of sight from Mom and Dad, you told me that I could glow in the dark and I could go by myself because you would always be able to see me. And I wandered away and got lost for like an hour.
Okay, one more story. I don't know how these things are being triggered, but I remember, because we're talking about sibling dynamics and something that I think actually would have made a good Simpsons episode. There was one day I convinced you that for cars passing by on the boulevard that we were going to turn around and pull down our pants and moon passing cars because it would be so funny. And I remember counting down, being like, all right, okay, this car's coming, 3, 2, 1. And like, we were both going to do it. And you pulled down your pants and mooned an oncoming car. I spun around. I did not pull down my pants. I'm like, Jacqueline, what are you doing? You're not supposed to show your bum to strangers. I went running into the house. I'm like, Mom, Jacqueline pulled down her pants and showed it to an oncoming car. And she got so mad at you. And she didn't even accept the clearly
that it was you.
Reasonable and justified explanation of like, no, but Ryan convinced me to and said it would be okay. And then like backed out at the last second and framed me. This is all Ryan. She was like, no, Jacqueline, you never let somebody convince you of anything.
You are a lady. Okay, well, I hope she's listening now and feels bad for not believing me.
So, me over here, husband to a woman and parent of 2 daughters. I've got them out there right now. They're safe. Don't worry, I can see them. They're glowing in the dark with their pants down, mooning oncoming traffic.
Because I told them that.
And when they come home, they are going under a board.
Justin always is like, marrying a girl with only brothers is the right move. That's the right move for everybody. And I'm like, well, I like to take credit for that. I don't know if I would say I treat everybody, because I feel like I treat all of you pretty differently based on the situation.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I thought it was like an interesting idea that's like your first experience with members of the opposite gender are the ones in your own family. And also going back to like the Simpsons level of imperfection, I think that we learned maybe later on, maybe not when we were going through the thick of it. And by the thick of it, I mean the thickness of the plywood board that was on top of me. What I've realized as I've gotten older is like the messiness. I feel like because our family is sometimes brutally honest with each other, that's fostered like an ease and a closeness within our family, because there's just like, we're not hiding anything and there's no such thing as like keeping up appearances anymore. I don't think like Mom and Dad really wanted us to keep up appearances as kids, but we were like, no, I refuse. I will not keep up with these appearances. And
as we are chewing garbage gum and driving in a vehicle that smoke screens the entire 401 highway in Ontario. We're just like, guys, we've got a standard in this family. Daryl's just puking orange soda in the back. She's like, guys, this is us right here.
Begging a poor Irish woman to shake the corns off her elbows for we can have chippies.
We have a standard in this family, and every one of you is going to meet it whether you like it or not.
We're going to march around in a circle, and we're going to nail down these standards.
The amount of the tears from my eyes right now and my armpits both are tearing up.
So sweaty. So sweaty. It's like this willingness to just be like unfailingly honest, whether good or bad. And so I'm like, that's why I think The Simpsons has been on 35 seasons. They have 768 episodes. I think there's a reason that it's been on for so long. And part of it is just people getting to see the closest version of their own families reflected back at them.
And that's, I also believe, a major contributing factor to the dozens of awards, including 37 Primetime Emmy Awards, 34 Annie Awards, and 2 Peabody Awards. It was named television's crowning achievement regardless of format. Time named it the 20th century's best television series.
Like, I'd have to agree, right? Can you think of anything?
No, there's nothing else that has spanned the actual generations. There are people like yourself who's now watching The Simpsons with your kids and still enjoying it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's still just something that no matter what, still nailing it.
I think the thing about The Simpsons that makes it so good too is they don't punch down.
Mm.
And so they make fun, they poke at people or whatever, but because they're not punching down, it never seems like super malicious. When they're bringing in like super famous people, the Bushes, and punching up, it doesn't feel like anybody's, I mean, I don't know, maybe Barbara Bush was very hurt by her depiction in The Simpsons. They never make it seem like anybody looks down on The Simpsons for being like the kind of family they are. Like, I do love that, like, in their town, they're just like a normal, regular family. It's been depicted that, and the first time it comes on, we're like, this family's crazy, I've never seen anything like this before. But in their universe, they could not be more normal. That's the whole thing about The Simpsons. Yeah,
I totally agree that it again just normalized a lot of the things that we knew growing up, which is helpful, I think. I don't know if that was the intention. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if they said and they're like, here's what we're going to do, we're going to make this crazy family so that every family feels normal. I think it was just like, let me just tell stories and let's think of these crazy situations and put it on air. And as it turns out, that's the reality for a wide majority of the families on the planet.
To be fair, I bet it was kind of like triggering for Mom to listen to us fight all day long, throwing 2x4s on each other and jumping on it. And then we'd go and we're like, yay, it's time to watch TV. And then just go watch another set of family members.
Watch ourselves. They're like, in this episode, Bart will throw a plank on his sister Lisa and jump on it. Like, and his friend will lock it in as his memory of that household. Let me ask you this question. Do you have a favorite episode, or have you already mentioned that? Do you have a favorite episode?
My favorite episode is the dolphin episode of Treehouse.
Oh, yeah, you said that.
And I love it because specifically something like that has happened to me. So if you have not seen the episode, I believe it's Lisa frees a dolphin and they all gain like consciousness and start talking to each other, and then they're able to start walking and they take over Springfield and they all stand there. Like, there's a scene where they're just all standing in the city square and every surface is just covered in dolphins and they take over the city, so every person who lives in Springville has to go live in the sea.
I love that, like, because remember that was on the it was on the Halloween episode, right?
Yeah,
the Treehouse of Horror. And so that was the scary story. Like, here's the scary story of dolphins taking over the town. Do you know what I mean?
There was also an episode, if you remember, where the two aliens come and take Maggie and they show up at the door, the two of them, and Homer opens the doors and says, "Oh, great Mormons." And we thought it was we were raised Mormon. So hearing mainstream Simpsons, who we worshipped, mention Mormonism, we were like, this is the best day of my life.
See, Mom? See? Do you see this? They have Mormons in it. Aliens are clearly making fun of. Yeah, this is a church movie.
Okay, just so to finish up the comment that I said, something did happen to me like the dolphins. I've told this story on the podcast before, when the deer surrounded me?
It is in an unreleased and in an episode that might not be released. Oh, paid subscribers.
I was thinking, like, what should we call our fans? You know how they always get like cute little names for podcasts?
Crunchies, lock it in. Our fans are the Crunchies. All right, you Crunchies.
Okay, Crunchies. This deer story has fully gone off the rails, but also there was one Christmas where we were decorating the Christmas tree and you guys started calling me Krusty the Snowman. I was probably 8 years old. You called me and you sang Krusty the Snowman at me so much that I ran crying into my room and would not come out until you were done decorating the tree.
You storm-quitted Christmas.
Storm-quitted that tree. No, nobody's gonna call me Krusty the Snowman. Crunchies are gonna love this. Crunchies are gonna love this story. So I was out walking my dog once. It was just last year. I was walking my dog. It was it was winter, so it was cold. And I was going through the park where I usually walk. And I looked up and there were a couple of deer. Deer are really common. I probably see 3 a day or whatever. Flex. So.
Weird flex.
Weird flex. I just see more deer than the average person. I don't want to brag. So I saw like 3 deer, and usually, especially because they can get really nervous around dogs and they'll like trample dogs, I just hang back and let them pass by. So it's probably, I don't know, 20 feet away. I stopped Penny, my dog, and we were going to let the deer cross by. So as I was waiting, I looked down on my phone to like check a couple messages. And when I looked up, there was like 10 deer. And I was like, oh, that's never happened before. Pretty weird. And I didn't think too much of it. I was just like, oh, and I took a picture of them because I was like, look at all these deer. And I looked down on my phone again to look at the picture. And when I looked up, there was like 40 deer. And then I was like, this is Simpsons Treehouse of Horror. The deer are taking over. And like my imagination immediately was like, I think I'm going to die by these deer. So I took Penny with me and we went across the park. Both of us were sitting on the bench. Penny was terrified. She is a hunting dog. This is her purpose in life. And she was so scared. And when I went over to the bench and sat down, more of them came. And by the time I sent you the picture, by the time I was over the bench, I was surrounded by 75 deer.
It is a sea, an actual sea of deer. Show notes. This will be on the Substack show notes. The photo of the deer. It is a sea, an ocean. Other synonyms?
See what other bodies of water? A lake?
It was a pond. We're getting smaller. It was a pond.
It was like a puddle of deer.
It was a puddle of deer.
That's what you call them, right? When they're all together, it's a puddle of deer. So I was texting you guys because it's just like one of those, like, I live in a weird place and sometimes really strange rural things will happen here, and me being surrounded by deer. So I'm taking pictures, I'm texting you guys, and I didn't know what to do because I don't want to move. I was surrounded by 75 deer like the dolphins in Springfield. As I was sitting there, an old man came up to the park and he had a bag of feed on his shoulder. And he's like, hey, and he calls the deer over. All of them turn and go straight to them. And he comes up to me, he's like, don't mind them. I've just been feeding them all winter. They think you've got food. And I was like, hey, thanks, Grandpa. Like, yeah. What the heck is wrong with you? So now they have an ordinance in our city that you're not allowed to feed deer. And
mainly because you promptly issued a complaint.
I got went into the city office and look, I will not.
That's who you were texting. You were texting us and city council.
I will not be terrorized by deer in my own town.
Is this the kind of town you want? Is this what you want?
And well, we can wrap this up because the Unhinged text of the week also has to do with the town in which
you're not gonna ask me my favorite episode?
Okay, sorry. What was your favorite episode?
The blowfish episode, where Homer eats the blowfish. And he's told that he has 24 hours to live, and he's like really thinking about his life. And the best part about that episode, and if you haven't watched it, pause, go watch it, and come back, because I'm about to ruin the ending for you. But he goes to sleep in his like lounger, listening to Larry King read the Bible. And he goes to sleep. I think he's drooling. And I believe Marge comes down the stairs the next morning. The sun is rising. Homer's not dead. His last 24 hours to live, he comes to all of these realizations about his life and things that he wants to do different and people he wants to spend more time with in this whole thing. And I think he goes back to watching televised bowling at the end of the episode. Is like, hey, I'm right back. And for some reason, I thought that was hilarious when I was, 10 years old.
It is like a good encapsulation of like, just, I guess, to wrap this all up, of like what it really was about, for all like our mom hating it and every mom in North America at the time thinking that The Simpsons was the worst television show. Every episode was a messed up family that like truly loved each other, and you know what I mean? So it was nice to see families fighting. And you knew they were okay.
It was really good to see that.
Like, they're going to fight, but they're going to be okay. And, like, I don't know, does that, like, it made me feel, like, better about things. It's like, yeah, we're going to fight. We're going to scream at each other. Doors are going to be slammed. Boards are going to be used. It's fine. At the end of the day, nothing but love.
I want somebody to do a drinking game for this episode. And every time we say the word crunchies, I would like for you to take a shot.
Well, I hope they like taking shots for the rest of eternity because we are calling them crunchies forever.
What's up, all you crunchies?
It's crunchies. It has to be crunchies. Sorry. If we had to put ourselves on the line by admitting that you ate...
We were eating garbage, actual garbage.
I feel like that's like the reward for this is the people who listen get to be called crunchies.
That's for each of you that's listening to this, you are paying your dues by being called crunchies. Thank you.
And like we can have a secret when we release our Snyder cut of whatever the episode is that we're not releasing right now. It'll be to crunchies only. You watch.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for that. Really happy that we talked about something other than murderers today.
Yeah, I mean, we can still talk about murders. It's on the table. It's just not. I don't want to talk about murderers more than once at a time.
Back to back.
Back to back.
We got to shuffle them in.
Yeah. Yeah. This is honestly something that I seriously consider. I'm like, how do I mix this up? When can I put more murderers in? I know we want murderers.
And not just murderers, sibling murderers. They have to be siblings who murder.
Things that I've searched recently is sibling murderers, sibling spies, sibling scam artists. The trifecta.
And the Simpsons.
And the Simpsons.
I'm really into alliteration.
Spies,
Simpsons.
scammers, and Simpsons.
Siblings, scammers.
Oh,
I'm just repeating you half a
That's the
syllable
new
later.
tagline of our podcast for all those
Sibling scammers,
for all those
Simpsons.
Crispies out there, for all you OG Crispies. Okay, are we ready for Unhinged text?
Yes, yeah, it's really I only stick around the whole podcast for this part.
They're like, what are you guys text about this week? And I bet that no one could guess it, even if they tried what we were texting about this week. It came from, again, my small town, and my small town has a community Facebook page, and I love to send screenshots of it to you guys because it's just so bizarre sometimes what people are. Someone's always fighting with someone else, someone's always complaining about just like the most obscure thing, and I often screenshot this, but this is probably like Hall of Fame for the weirdness of the place that I live in. I'll just read out the entire conversation and the screenshot that I sent, which was the message on the Facebook page in its entirety. And I've made so many people read this out loud because I feel like you have to read it out loud.
And hey, this is public domain, folks. This is in the public domain.
This is on the community page. I'm sorry if this woman is listening. Hello, abrupt. Hello. I apologize if this is disturbing. I truly need help. I've made a similar post like this before and wasn't able to find any type of opportunity. I'm getting ready to move, and I still have my little chihuahua that recently passed away in my freezer. Two heart emojis.
Are they broken hearts? They're broken hearts though, right? I'm pretty sure they're...
Oh yeah, they're broken hearts. 2 broken heart emojis. It's terrible, and I honestly need to get it taken care of. That's one thing I know for sure.
That's one thing on the list.
I gotta check this off the list. The chihuahua's in my freezer. It's terrible, and I honestly need to get it taken care of. My goal is to have her cremated since she was with me for 15 plus years. All caps. I need help.
Yes, you do.
I'm wondering if anybody can give a helping hand where I can figure out how to cremate my dog in my freezer. That's it. That's the post.
I love that the first order of business was a Facebook post, not a phone call to a veterinarian who might be able to connect you with somebody who, I don't know, cremates animals for a living, but to post that onto a public forum saying, I need help, heart emoji, frozen chihuahua in my freezer.
In some ways, like, I can, like, weirdly empathize just because I, too, will panic and make bad decisions. I mean, I've never put a dead dog in my freezer, but, like...
I'm not on that level.
I have gotten myself into situations where I was like, oh, that was not the right thing. But, like, ma'am, you take this kind of information with you to your grave or freezer. But you don't just post it out there for everybody to see. And especially, imagine if you've eaten at her house in the past 3 months.
Should I just get a pie from my freezer?
Can someone go grab the ice cream out of the freezer? Like, it's to the left. Like, the right? No,
it's under the chihuahua.
That's Jose, my chihuahua. So I sent it to you guys. It's the new craziest post on the city Facebook page alert. You said, ha ha ha, WTF, lots of Fs.
Yes. Just 3 lines of Fs.
You also clocked and texted, and honestly, I need to get it taken care of. Which I think is probably one of that, and the fact that she said I posted this before and nobody helped me. Like, yeah, maybe let's.
Do you mean everybody ignored you and possibly reported you?
And I said, who among us hasn't left a body in our freezers too long? Who among us hasn't referred to cremating that freezer chihuahua as an opportunity? You said, oh, and nobody responded to a psychopath. So I did have to bring like an outside source into our Unhinged text this week, but I really think it was worth it. I think it was necessary. This is just like a completely different dog related text, but you know, Jonathan's friend, shout out to Rachel, Jonathan's friend Rachel, who has been around our family for a long time. I posted when episode 4 came out and we had talked about you meeting that Jack Russell Terrier. I posted on my Instagram page, I left the link and I was like, and you'll find out about this dog who has the best name ever and you'll never guess it. I'll give you $5 if you can guess it, but no one will ever guess it. And she messaged me and was like, okay, well, now I need to know it. I'm like, well, first of all, hurtful, listen to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the instructions were clear.
Then I said, oh, it's a Jack Russell and his name is Jacqueline and I've never been more flattered. Like, even though the owners have never met me, it's named after me personally. Oh, question marks. And she was like, okay, but kind of weird. They're so obsessed with you. I was like, well, I get it, but...
Well, even when I met her, she was like, the dog's name is Jacqueline. And I'm like, oh, like CLYN? And she goes, CQLEINE. And I was like, what? And she goes, like the podcast host. I was like, what? And she laughed and ran to her car.
She's a crispy and she was just trying to get as close to you as possible. I hate that Christmas.
We don't blame you. We don't blame
you. I'm sorry. Like, we don't plan these things. We did not talk about this beforehand.
But when the universe speaks, you listen.
It's too perfect.
All right. Well, we're really good at endings, so we are going to continue that trend.
Week I'm like, I'm going to think of one. I'm going to nail it. And every week I am left doing this.
Which is just, I will start running the music some point now. And then we just kind of trail off. Like the conversation, we want to give the impression that the conversation actually continues. But for the Crispies out there, we actually just shut the call down and we don't speak to each other for another week. We random texts, but then we just fire up a call a week later and we're back on.
And if someone says something that's good, we're like, save it for the podcast. Don't say it.
Don't talk to me. Stop.
So good. Jonathan was telling me something earlier and he was like, you can't say this on your podcast. I'm like, Jonathan, I'm not just like mining everything for podcast fodder. I mean, I am.
But also, can you go back and repeat the first part? I want to make sure I get these words in the right order.
I'm like taking notes in my Unhinged notebook. Maybe we
those recorders? What's it? The Kevin McAllister recorders from Home Alone?
The Yak Back?
The Yak Back, yeah. All right. Well, thank you all. No. Shout out to all the Crispies. Thank you to all the Crispies who made it this far in this episode. As always, we went a little bit off the rails, but we always bring it right back to a nice package closing, as we always do. We will see you next week. And I'm going to make the request again. Please rate this podcast. We know it's a 1, but lie and give us 5 anyways in terms of the star rating. And subscribe so that you can be the first Crispy to know that these Crispiest Crispy, Moist Crispy episodes are in your moistened crispy inbox. What?
Stay crispy, my friends.
And on that note, we will see you, talk to you, voice our voices. I'm going to stop. This is done. We're done.
Okay.
Next week, new episode.